everyone. We are here in our day 2 at JAX London 2018, and I'm here with Michiel Rook. So you just had a talk on the implications of the GDPR on event sourcing. Could you give us a quick recap?
Yeah, so today I talked about the history of the GDPR and the most important principles of it. So consent is one of the important things in GDPR, and as an organization you need to be able to demonstrate consent to process data for an individual. And I also talked about an interesting article, which is the right to erasure, so that a person can actually ask an organization for their data to be removed. And we talked about a few strategies how you could deal with that in event-sourced applications.
Great. So just to make things clear, so assuming a customer files an Article 17, which is the right to erasure application, what are the necessary steps to follow? Well,
one of the important things is if you have sold or given that data or parts of the data to a third party, you need to notify them that request has been invoked. Then you need to remove it in an event source system from your read models, from your projections, and then ultimately from your event store as well. And that's where things could get a little bit interesting.
Yeah. So could you maybe explain a bit the concept of immutability and how it can complicate things when it comes to erasing or anonymizing personal information?
Yeah, so the event store or the event log is essentially a history or a log of history, of facts that occurred. And like history, we cannot change that. The facts are the facts. So in event sourcing theory, we say that once an event is saved, it is immutable. We cannot change it. It happened. Which is a problem when you are dealing with GDPR 17, Article 17, that you actually need to remove personal data out of your system. And so that means maybe being a little bit more pragmatic about the immutability or mutability of events.
So going back and seeing like the whole developing under the GDPR story, I recently had an interview with security researcher, Mr. Vladimir Smitka, and he said that GDPR opened a greatly beneficial discussion on privacy protection. Before that, nobody cared.
Yes.
So, what's your take on that?
Well, I think what he says is true in that we as an industry, I think we have ourselves to blame in part for the GDPR and the way it is written, because even recently there have been all these data breaches, leaking of data, improper use of personal data, and like you said, and like he said, that for years nobody really cared. And so I think that now we have legislation which, even though it's very broad and vague and makes our life a little bit more difficult, maybe it's not such a bad thing that our lives are a little bit more difficult and that we think a little bit more about what we do with personal data.
So you have mentioned somewhere in your blog, if I'm not mistaken, that event sourcing can also assist with GDPR compliance.
Yes.
Could you elaborate a bit on that?
Like I said before, consent is one of the key central concepts within the GDPR. So you need to have consent to process data, and it needs to be clearly distinguishable from other needs to process data. So consenting to getting newsletters does not mean you are consenting to being included in a machine learning algorithm, for example. So you need to have consent for both things. And you need to also be able to withdraw your consent for those things as well. And if you record the consent as events in event sourcing and use the event log as an audit log, you can clearly demonstrate that the consent was given, by whom and when. And that helps you with that part of the GDPR.
Great. Good to have this point of view as well, because everyone thinks that GDPR is just a huge headache.
It is a headache, but it also has positive parts. Yes, definitely. Yes.
Great. So I have one last question for you. When do you think we will be over this? When will we stop thinking of GDPR as a challenge for developers? When will we reach this point when developing under the GDPR will simply be the status quo?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this as well, and in all honesty, I don't really know. What you see right now is I think there has been one court case in Germany but at least in the Netherlands where I'm from, there haven't been any that I'm aware of. So we need some guidelines on how we can interpret the law and how we cannot. And then it needs to be part of frameworks and tools that we use, and this is starting to bubble out now. So this is starting to come up, and maybe in a few years this will be standard practice. Right now you see everybody scrambling about and trying to figure out how to deal with it. Maybe in a few years. I don't want to put a date on it because I really don't know.
Cool. Thank you very much. It was a very informative interview and a very informative session you had. And enjoy the rest of your day here.
Thank you. You as well. Thank you.